A theodicy is an answer to what philosophers and Christian theologians have called the problem of evil, the existence of evil in the world. Now, in about 9 months, if all goes well, I will add the THM to my Master of Divinity and be a bona fide theologian. But we had an incident this past week which really cries out for explanation. And I'm talking about this tragedy that happened at Camp Mystic in Central Texas. Now, for those of you who may be watching this months or even years later, I'm talking about the disaster that befell Camp Mystic, a Christian camp in Central Texas, Kerr County, on July 4th, 2025. Apparently, they received about 4 months worth of rain in that many hours, something like that. And out of nowhere came 20 feet of water and washed away several hundred people. At least 120 so far have been listed among the dead. As I'm recording, there's still over 150 missing. Absolute disaster. But what struck me, and perhaps a lot of you out there, is that the victims, I mean, it's sad whoever dies in such a thing, but one of the striking things was that there was this Christian camp for girls called Camp Mystic. And apparently they were in the center of this disaster, and among dozens of victims are young teens, young girls, counselors who were at this Christian camp on July 4th. And we are, of course, stunned to think that these young people who are away from home, studying the scriptures, being among other Christians, would have a disaster hit them like this. The question naturally begs, where was God's protection? Where was God's love? And a lot of people are asking this. A lot of atheists are pointing at this situation here and they're saying, aha, you say you Christians, you thought your God takes care of you? Well, where was he at Camp Mystic? All these girls, these like 3 dozen young teens, counselors who are probably not much older than them, all dead. What happened? How do you reconcile your claim of a loving God and that disaster? How do you do it? I'm going to try and do it here. And I'm going to do it with the help of an apocryphal book, which us evangelicals don't have a lot of use for it normally. The Apocrypha, some of you may know, these are 15 documents that are written from the time that the Old Testament ends, around the 4th century BC, to the time that the New Testament begins. Talking about the 27 documents of the 1st century that comprise our New Testament. But there's a 400-year period where 15 documents are written, which we evangelicals, Protestants, we do not include in the canon of Scripture. We consider them deuterocanonical. And there's some theological reasons for that. Some of them contain an emphasis on righteous works, which Protestants find to be anathema. In any case, there is one book called The Wisdom of Solomon, and its author attributes or uses King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived in antiquity, the son of King David, who lived about 1,000 years before Christ. This book is called The Wisdom of Solomon, as if Solomon himself had wrote these ideas. Actually, it was written about 100 years before Jesus was born. And it's written by a Hellenistic Jew. But there is a passage in the 4th chapter in The Wisdom of Solomon, which I think is absolutely inspired. This is a theodicy, an explanation for the problem of evil, which fits not only for the tragedy in Camp Mystic, But for almost every time we see a young person who appears like the last person in the world that should have some injustice befall them, when you know of a person, we've all known young people who we cannot understand why they died early, why God would allow such and such a thing to happen to them. This passage from the fourth chapter of the Wisdom of Solomon offers what I believe is a plausible rationale. So I want to share it with you. It's only 7 verses long. I want to share it with you, and I think you'll agree with me that this is perhaps as good a theodicy as has ever been offered, at least as good as one I've ever seen, which I believe applies to this situation here at Camp Mystic. Stand by, I'm going to show it to you. So this is from the 4th chapter of this apocryphal book called The Wisdom of Solomon. I'm using the New Revised Standard Version, the updated edition, which I think is among the better of the English translations. Only 7 verses, but follow along with me. See if you can follow what the author was trying to say, why it was that an innocent young person who did not deserve to die in a terrible way, why this may have happened to them. The author says, and he uses a story about a young man who did die early. He says, there was one who pleased God and was loved by him, and while living among sinners, was taken up. He was caught up so that evil might not change his understanding or guile deceive his soul. For the fascination of wickedness obscures what is good, and roving desire perverts the innocent mind. Continuing. Being perfected in a short time, he fulfilled long years, for his soul was pleasing to the Lord. Therefore he, God, hastened him from the midst of wickedness. Yet the peoples saw and did not understand or take such a thing to heart, that God's grace and mercy are with his elect, and that he watches over his holy ones. With his elect. And this word elect means very best. The last 2 verses here. The righteous who have died will condemn the ungodly who are living, and youth that is quickly perfected will condemn the prolonged old age of the unrighteous. For they will see the end of the wise and will not understand what the Lord purposed for them and for what he kept them safe. You understand what this author was saying? There were some who were perfected early, and they were taken out of a situation, taken out of the midst of wickedness, which would have perverted their innocent minds, their innocent souls. Rather than being left alive to grow old, to grow cynical, to become as wicked as everyone around them, God took them home early. He took them out of the midst of wickedness so that they would, in the end, stand there and wonder why it was he allowed the other people to grow old, who will be condemned. So these young people who died early died righteous and went from Camp Mystic to Camp Heaven. before there was any opportunity for them to fall away. If you're looking for an explanation for why God would allow such a thing to happen, and I don't believe he purposed this on anyone, but I believe he allowed it to happen. He could have, of course, stopped it, like he stopped the Red Sea from crushing the Israelites when they were escaping. He allowed it to happen to these innocents who were already righteous in his sight, who were already perfect. He brought them from Camp Mystic to Camp Heaven. And had they been allowed to grow old and leave Camp Mystic to join the sin-sick world in which we all live in, where would they be 100 years from now? Would they still be righteous? How many of them would be? What I'm saying is, we have a God who allows bad things to happen to good people to prevent worse things from happening. That has been my experience in my 65 years now. Okay. God allows the bad to prevent the worse. And so if you are struggling for an explanation for why a loving God would allow such a thing to happen to these poor girls and their counselors in this place, I would say to you that he allowed something bad to prevent something much, much worse. He's a merciful God. And this author in the Wisdom of Solomon, he understood that. I hope that helps. I know it's of limited help, of course, especially for you families there. If any of you are listening, my heart goes out to you, you know. But know that these young people are with their Creator and their Redeemer right now. They're not in the midst of wickedness with the rest of us, who still must struggle, who still have to walk that long and hard road that leads to life. They have crossed, they've made it to the end of that road. And you need to join them at the end of that road. They're waiting to see you. God bless, and have a good night.